Local broadcasts of KΑKOU are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo. And by Hawaii Catholic Community Foundation, creating a legacy that honors Hawaii's 200-year Catholic heritage while building a strong, faith-filled future. Hawaiian Native Corporation, honoring the legacy of Kalaupapa and the courage and resiliency of its residents. Since 1866, Kalaupapa on Molokaʻi has been home to people living with Hansen's disease or leprosy. Thousands were banished there after being diagnosed with or even suspected of having the illness. Today, Kalaupapa is a refuge for the few remaining residents, most who are in their 80s. So what will happen next for this isolated peninsula? Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of KΑKOU, Hawaii's Town Hall, start now.
Aloha and welcome to KAKOU, Hawaii's Town Hall, live from the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Multimedia Studio. I'm Yanchi Denise. Kalaupapa is one of the most isolated places in Hawaii. Surrounded by ocean on three sides and some of the tallest sea cliffs in the world, the peninsula on Molokaʻi's north shore became the site of forced exile for thousands of people diagnosed with Hansen's disease. Now, as the patient population dwindles, questions are growing about how Kalaupapa should be preserved, protected, and remembered. But before we look ahead, we must first understand its past. When the settlement was first established in 1866, there was no cure for the disease once known as leprosy. Fear shaped government policy. Families were separated. Many people sent to Kalaupapa would never return home. Over the years, PBS Hawaii's Leslie Wilcox documented the stories of patients, preserving firsthand accounts of how they lived.
And in that time, you know you're here to, you're exiled, you're here to die, never to see them again. So when you have a funeral and you pass away, at least you have closure. But this to be living here, knowing that you have children and family out, and there's no phones before, we just have the crank phone. We had no phone to call to Honolulu. And we couldn't write letters. They stopped us. You know that?
They stopped you from writing letters?
Well, they used to fumigate everything. You know the letters, they used to cut the corners. And they used to fumigate it overnight in the fumigation room. And my father said all the old times that they would sterilize them so they don't get children again.
The suffering in Kalaupapa drew worldwide attention. Father Damien and Mother Marianne Cope devoted their lives to caring for patients there, work that would ultimately lead both to sainthood in the Catholic Church. But even in isolation, the people of Kalaupapa built community, forming churches, choirs, sports teams, and deep bonds. They created lives filled not only with hardship, but friendship, humor, faith, and resilience.
What was it like living here when you were a kid? What was it like?
It was all right, you know. Oh, nobody tell me what to do. We went on the beach, no fences around. I think we have to be home at a certain time, you know. There was a little control on don't stay up late. We have to need our nap in the afternoon, you know. It was good. I like it.
Life in Kalaupapa also meant living with the physical realities of Hansen's disease, injuries that could worsen over time because patients often lost feelings in their hands and feet, and many lost their eyesight.
Starting a blister, and because they don't feel, you keep using your hand, even you have it dressed. Sometimes you get the pain, but it doesn't last forever. And then next thing you know, you lose one finger, you lose the second finger, and you always have these slits at the bottom of the base of the finger in the palm, and also in the feet. So those two places on the body suffered the most damage.
Effective treatments emerged in the 1940s, and mandatory isolation officially ended in 1969. Still, many residents chose to remain in Kalaupapa. It had become their home. Today, with fewer than 10 patients still living there, Hawaii faces the question of what should come next. KΑKOU means all of us, and tonight we come together to discuss Kalaupapa's future. How should this land, sacred to Native Hawaiians and deeply tied to the history of Hansen's disease, here in Hawaii be cared for in the years ahead? And how do we honor the people who lived and built community there? We want to hear from you in our discussion. You can email or call in your questions. We're also streaming live at pbshawaii.org and on our YouTube page. In our town hall tonight, we have government leaders, Native Hawaiian advocates, Molokaʻi community members, descendants connected to Kalaupapa, medical experts, and those helping to shape the future of this historic place. We do want to mention that Board of Land and Natural Resources Chair Dawn Chang did accept our invitation to be here tonight, but let us know a little earlier today that she was unexpectedly unable to attend. So let's begin now, and I want to start with Dr. Kalani Brady, who's cared for patients at Kalaupapa for nearly 3 decades. Dr. Brady, when you think about Kalaupapa, what do you want people to most understand about the community that has been built there beyond the stigma of the disease?
The peace and joy of the residents who had Hansen's disease in Kalaupapa. They accepted their, as Boogie said on the few minutes ago, they accepted their place in Kalaupapa. Kalaupapa became an ʻOhana unto itself. Many, if not most, of the residents of Kalaupapa, 8,000 over the 150 years plus that we've had, were okied by their families because of the fear and shame of the disease, the lack of knowledge about how it was spread. And so their ʻOhana, their family, became the other residents of the settlement. And everybody was on a first name basis. Kalaupapa moved as a unit. We went to baptisms, topside, weddings, funerals, and we were introduced. This is Kalaupapa, and we would all stand as one. And that's how these patients lived. They accepted what had happened, and they were remarkably joyful and peaceful and very, very faithful. Almost all of them went not only to the Protestant church, which had the first service, but the Catholic church, which had a mass. 20 minutes after that, everybody moved from the Protestant church to the Catholic church. And every Sunday that occurred.
And what is the community like today?
It's a small community. When I started 25 or so years ago, there were parties every night. That was the joy. There was a bar that sold beer and wine, Fuesaina's bar most recently, and it was a very active settlement. Now with the few that remain, averaging in their 90s with a couple over 100, they are cared for, and they are still close friends with each other and with the 3 KΑKOU, of which I am a part, that have taken care of them for 25 years.
Oh, thank you for painting that picture so descriptive. I think we really get a sense of what it was like to be there. Nancy Holman is the superintendent of Kalaupapa National Historic Park. I want to show us a map here of the area that is under the jurisdiction right now of the Park Service, because it really paints a picture. You can see that area all there in green encompasses Kalaupapa National Historical Park. And Nancy, when I think people hear that, and especially when you see the map, you assume that the Park Service controls the entire peninsula, but that's not exactly how it works. Can you walk us through how the jurisdiction all works there today with the Park Service, the Health Department, and of course Maui County?
Ooh, do you have a couple hours? Jurisdiction is complex, and probably the easiest way to describe it is that we have a different relationship to every landowner. So the predominant landowners, Department of Lands and Natural Resources, that's about 2/3 of the property, a little less than a third, correct me if I'm wrong, Department of Hawaiian Homelands, predominantly around the Kalaupapa settlement. It's a little piece of Department of Transportation. There's also privately held lands at the top of the Pali belonging to R.W. Meyer. And then there are 3 ecclesiastical organizations that have facilities there as well, so kind of private property in holdings. And then currently the Park Service and Department of Health co-manage the day-to-day operations. It's probably the easiest way to, and it's its own county.
And if somebody were to want to visit, how does that work?
Oof. okay. So when the National Park Service came in 1980, so U.S. Congress gave us a pretty clear rule book. Unlike a lot of national parks, ours is very specific public law. They capped the visitation at 100 people per day. Now, as far as I know, other than the canonization events, we haven't ever come close to that number over time. And also there was a big nod to the fact that the patients had been running tours of Kalaupapa for the public since the 1950s through a concession contract with the state. So we extended that in our enabling legislation, holds that first right for commercial services for patients. Up until just very recently, there has been a patient who wanted to run those tours. Auntie Meli Watsuki is the last patient that I'm aware of who is interested in running public tours there. There are other ways to visit Kalaupapa if you're a descendant. Both the Park Service and ʻOhana O Kalaupapa both host people to come reconnect with the gravesite if we are aware where it's at or where we think it is. You can be there if you are a guest, an invited guest of a resident. So as the doctor was saying, a lot of people used to come to Kalaupapa because the patients were so actively inviting people down there as they age less and less. Other organizations have been down in Kalaupapa a lot, so lots and lots of different ways to visit. But currently, if you are a visitor, like an actual Park Service visitor, you have to be on a Park Service approved tour.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Diana Felton is the chief of the Hawaii Health Department's Communicable Disease and Public Health Nursing Division. Doctor, the state health department has had responsibility for the patient settlement for its entirety. Under a bill just passed this legislative session, those obligations will change. Can you tell us a little bit about the changes that have now passed under this legislation?
Certainly. The legislation in Hawaii that defines the Department of Health's role at Kalaupapa is really focused on patient care activities and taking care of the patients and the individuals who live there. At some point in the future, when there are no longer patients there, the role of the Department of Health in essential goes away. And the changes in the bill really reflect that. So the way the bill is designed is that the changes will go into effect about a year after the last patient passes away, and will transfer the last of DOH's activities and management activities to the other entities on the peninsula. And I think the most significant feature of the legislation is the county jurisdiction. So currently the Department of Health has jurisdiction and control of Kalawao County, which has coterminous borders with the national park. And it's just a really unusual setup. There's nowhere else in the world where a health department runs a county. And there were reasons for it for a long time, but those reasons are changing. And so in the latest legislation, the county jurisdiction will change to Maui County.
Okay, well, let's talk to the head of Maui County now, and that is Mayor Richard Bissen, who joins us here tonight. As the state does prepare for the transition that the doctor was just laying out there, what role do you see Maui County playing going forward? And do you have a sense of, we know it's a year after the last patient no longer lives there, either because they've passed on or because they've moved outside of the settlement, but how are you preparing for this transition?
Well, we're having discussions about this very thing. I think most people understand Maui is already made up of Molokaʻi, Lanai, and Kahoʻolawe, besides Maui Island. And so Kalawao County is, of course, part of Molokaʻi Island. And so I think it makes sense to most people that Maui County would step in when the Department of Health is no longer overseeing this. But as already mentioned, the largest landowners there are DLNR and then DHHL. So for us, it's going to take a conversation mostly with our community, and we want community engagement all the way through this. We're prepared to step in, again, if there's no one else, obviously, willing to do it, but I don't want to make an assumption that we're the right group to step in without hearing from our community first. And I mean all of the folks on Molokaʻi and the descendants of those, the Ka'ohana, Kalaupapa, folks that have been working on this for years. We want this transition to be respectful and collaborative and mindful of the preservation of this very special aina. And so, you know, as the mayor, I don't want us to shirk any responsibility should we be the ones chosen to take it over. But I would have to say it's not an automatic decision, and it's certainly not mine to make alone. So, you know, we want to talk with our federal partners, our state partners, but mostly I think we want to engage our community and ask them who's best. And if it's us, we're certainly prepared to step in.
Okay, well, one person, of course, who does represent those residents is Keani Rawlins-Fernandez, who represents Molokaʻi on the county council. What are you hearing about from the constituents that you represent about some of their concerns about this transition? We know, just based on some of the questions that are coming in, and thank you for those who are writing, that there's great interest in visiting the area. You know, how do you balance potential visitors and given the historic nature and the specialness of this place?
Yeah. I want to thank Mayor Bissen for always, deferring to our community and supporting, what it is that our community is asking for. I think what we discussed was kind of first things first. Department of Health's kuleana to the patients, is coming to an end, and we don't know when that'll happen. Maui County is positioned to quickly take over jurisdiction. Maui County already has jurisdiction for the rest of Molokaʻi. So it makes sense. We also have MOUs with National Park Service for fire and police that has existed and will exist for the duration of their lease with DHHL. There are some in the community that are interested in being a Molokaʻi County. We have set up two departments under Maui County, the Department of Oiwi Resources and the Department of Agriculture under Maui County. And it's taking, several years to stand up these departments, and to stand up a whole county, Molokaʻi County, would take some time. And like I mentioned, we don't know when this one-year clock will start. And we at Maui County, this wouldn't preempt our community from becoming Molokaʻi County if that's something that our community members would want to do. As far as public access, that's going to be a really big discussion that we'll have after this.
Do you think a year is enough to do all of the transition work that needs to be done? I mean, it sounds like a very heavy lift.
So we did ask the county, the administration, and myself, my office, did ask and work with Representative Mahina Poipoi to put in a 2-year transition. And unfortunately, when the bill got to conference committee, it changed back from 2 years to 1 year.
Okay. We've talked a lot about the landowners in this area. We want to show you one more map that really helps to illustrate just who owns the land in this area. If you can see here, the settlement itself is there in blue, and you can see that's DHHL land, Department of Hawaiian Homelands. That's the settlement and Cliff Trail, and then there's another parcel over on the very side of your screen there. And of course, the Department of Land and Natural Resources owns the lion's share of the peninsula, and so they own that land. Department of Hawaiian Homelands does control roughly 1,200 acres in and around Kalaupapa, much of that under license for the National Park Service, the map that we showed you earlier in the program. Katie Lambert is deputy to the chair of DHHL. Katie, some Native Hawaiians see Kalaupapa as a place that should be ultimately under Native Hawaiian stewardship. What kind of conversations are you having at DHHL about the future of this place?
Yes, so we need to begin consulting with our beneficiaries. So we are actually the last island plan for Molokaʻi, because DHHL has its own planning process given the act. So it does engage with regional planning as well as island planning. And the last Molokaʻi island plan was back in 2005. So it's overdue for discussions about what the community and our beneficiaries want with regard to Kalaupapa. Back in 2005, homesteading, that kind of things was probably not thought of. So the island plan didn't really talk about like the settlement area. It didn't contemplate what might happen if the last patient were no longer there. But there was community usage contemplated. There was, you know, an idea of having a community center built for historic and educational reasons. So we do need to engage with our beneficiaries again, update the island plan. One of the big topics will be listening to our beneficiaries really, really closely about how they envision the use of Kalaupapa going forward. You know, there is a desire to perhaps revisit homesteading in the area. We just have to be really, really thoughtful about how we go ahead and do that post transition when it is back in DHHL hands. And of course, we do have the general lease with the National Park Service. And so they actually do manage currently day-to-day operations. So it involves a lot of discussions with both our beneficiaries and then with the National Park Service as far as continuing our relationship with them for management.
Yeah, and how long is that lease in effect? Is that something that's renewed on a regular basis, or is that in perpetuity? How does that work?
No, it's a 50-year lease, and it began in 1991 and will expire in 2041.
Okay, that was some good quick math there. I like that. I mean, that is very interesting if you think about, first of all, the sensitivity of the place, but also just the difficulty of access. Do you think it's realistic to have homesteading there?
Well, those are parts of the discussion, and we do have Mikiʻala here who's actually lived that life. And so I think some of the discussions is, while it is definitely something that DHHL and its beneficiaries should explore, there needs to be some reality grounded because of the sacredness and because of just the logistics, right? I mean, people who envision themselves living there need to understand that it's not a daily commute back and forth from town in Kalaupapa and topside. And just the fragileness of the area, right? I mean, there's a lot of environmental considerations, and so you need beneficiaries who really understand that deeply, right? That it's not homesteading in the way that we've known it topside, right? It's a very, it can be homesteading, of course, but it's a different way of malama, you know, that particular area. And we do have other examples, right? We do have other examples in places like Kahiki Nui, King's Landing, of beneficiaries who are doing it in that way. And so we just have to be really, really deliberate in our discussions and honest with ourselves about what's possible in Kalaupapa.
Thank you for that. DeGray Vanderbilt is part of ʻOhana O Kalaupapa, a group of residents, descendants, and community advocates focused on preserving the history and future of this place. What would your group like to see happen there?
Well, I think what the group would like to see is what the patients would have liked to have seen. ʻOhana O Kalaupapa is an organization that was conceived and fostered by the patient residents. It is the patient residents organization. I was a founding member, and I think we have a great website, and one of the brochures on there is the future of Kalaupapa, and the main subtitle, will the voices of the people finally be heard? And I think that's very important because for the last several years there's been a transition planning process being conducted, and it's been by all government agencies. It hasn't included the topside community. It hasn't included the patients organization in Kalaupapa, which has federal authorization to operate at Kalaupapa just like MPS. And so I think the mayor mentioned community engagement. I think that's still something that really needs to be done, is to get community engagement and get the topside community and others involved. and not just the government agencies. And this new bill that passed, 1432, Senate Bill 1432, at the end of it, it said, any further discussions on the transition planning of Kalaupapa will include ʻOhana O Kalaupapa and a topside community organization. And I think that's the main thing that needs to be still done. Okay. And it's gonna be a lot of discussion. It's gonna take some time because nobody but the government agencies have been involved up to now. And there's another great pamphlet out there called Molokaʻi, Future of a Hawaiian Island. This was done in 1984 by a group of Molokaʻi people, and it outlined the current short-term, long-term goals of Molokaʻi, a map. And as you know, Molokaʻi is different from every island. They've fought off all the development. Nobody messes with them now. But they have a place where all the young people are coming back now, because it's amazing that they're leaving big jobs on the mainland, coming back, taking over the schools and everything else. And I asked one girl about why she came back. She was making over $100,000 a year on the mainland. She's making $40,000 on Molokaʻi, and she says, you don't know what peace of mind it is to know you can raise your family and live a lifestyle, and it isn't going to be changed by the influx of a lot of tourists or other government actions. So that's where a lot of the discussion really has to focus on.
Thank you for that. I want to turn now to another resident, Mikiʻala Pescaia, a cultural practitioner from Molokaʻi, also has worked as an interpretive park ranger with the Park Service at Kalaupapa. From the conversations that you've been having, do you agree that the community has not perhaps had enough of a voice, or how do you feel like these discussions are going, and what are your biggest concerns with this transition?
I think first off, it's acknowledging that Kalaupapa, the composition of the Kalaupapa community itself has been changing and shifting, where there were hundreds of patients. Now we're down to a small handful. And in the last 10, 20 years, it's really been all of the workers for the Department of Health and for the Park Service who have filled in all the roles in a community to keep the fabric, the social fabric, and that the mana and the spirit of Kalaupapa alive. And so I think just recently with the DHHL taking a different look at how they would like to manage their lands there, it was engaging the Kalaupapa community and starting to see them more than just workers, in that with the Park Service, at one time, 75% of the staff were Molokaʻians from topside. They're Hawaiian. They all are considered homesteaders, but I'm not sure how many homestead communities everybody wakes up in the morning and says, my whole duty today is to make this place a better place, is to honor the kupuna. And if you don't do your job, you get kicked out, you get fired. And so kind of, when you walk around Kalaupapa, there's a pride and a dedication. And if you live there and work there in a time where you had to look a patient in the eye and make a commitment to look after this place, to remember them, to steward their story and make sure nobody forgets, and to do things in a very particular way. They want the grass cut this way, don't cut that tree, that's my friend. They tell you all the stories. There is a sense of duty as a Molokaʻian that this is the mo'olelo of this aina before even this chapter of history. Molokaʻi is centuries old, and we're going to be around for a long time. And so the primary stewards of this story should be the people of Molokaʻi. And so I'm going to say that there should be more conversation with the Kalaupapa community, because they're the ones there day to day. But they also go back home, topside to their families, and they share a lot of conversation there. So there is a little bit of outreach, but with the broader community, there really needs to be a space where we can have safe conversation while acknowledging the eha, the kaumaha, the sadness and the hurt, that is the legacy of the history of Kalaupapa. And that needs to be put in a very safe place so that we can actually have productive conversations about what that future looks like.
Thank you for that perspective. And you did mention the history before it became a settlement. And for more on that, I want to turn to historian Davianna McGregor, who's a founding member of the Ethnic Studies Department at UH Manoa. Professor, long before Kalaupapa became a settlement for people with Hansen's disease, this peninsula had its own history, its own communities. What can you tell us about what life was like there before the settlement and who may have been there?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I just want to say I came upon this doing more research into the history of Kalaupapa before the settlement when asked by the National Park Service to try to find descendants of the people who lived there before the settlement was set up, because they acknowledged that those descendants might also want to have a say in how the future of the peninsula, shapes up. So it was an honor to do that, and I put out a broad net through the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, Kauai Ola, and I got all the names that I could find of anybody who had lived there at any time. So all the people who had applied for land awards during the Mahele's time, all the people who had paid taxes at any point in time. These are all records that the park had collected, and then I did additional research to see. And so I put together all these names and put out a call and say, does anyone, have a connection? And, it went over about 3 or 4 years' time, and most of the calls I got back, or the responses I got back, were people who said, well, that's my name, I would probably be related. What can you tell me about my connection to this place? And so it seems that a lot of the people who were originally there and then displaced, and there was different stages in how the people were displaced. Some went voluntarily when it was first proclaimed that this would be a settlement, and they were offered to move away, and they had families on Kauai or Oahu. So the families are all on every island. It's not just on Molokaʻi or just on Oahu. And but it seems that when they were dispersed, and then Kalaupapa became associated with the Hansen's disease, that people lost that connection or no longer passed on the knowledge to the next generation. So there were very few people who came forward, as I said. There is evidence that in the last stages of the displacement, there was land that the government acquired in Walapue on east end on Molokaʻi, and they had the families could select which land they wanted to move in, but there were maybe only about 20 parcels there, and by then there were not as many people. A lot of them had already started the transition off. And in the last stage, under the provisional government, after the Queen was overthrown and the provisional government came to power, that's when the final eviction, forceful eviction, took place. And it also coincided with the policy of the provisional government to use the designation and the declaration of someone as having leprosy as a way to isolate political opponents. And there's a lot of evidence in many stories that you hear from different islands that people did not really have leprosy, but they were proclaimed to have leprosy and banished to Kalaupapa as a political move. And you can see that in that, now because they were going to expand the number of people they were isolating to the peninsula, they needed to finally get rid of the last of the people who had lived there traditionally. But if we look at the records of Kalaupapa, I was kind of refreshing my memory. So in the time, we look at the time before Kamehameha and how the islands were. Am I something here?
Yeah, I think we're having a little bit of audio trouble here, so we just want to make sure that everyone at home can hear you just right.
But if you look at the time before Kamehameha, Molokaʻi had been fought over between the chief of Maui, Kahikili, and also before them, and then the chiefs of Oahu. And then There was also within Molokaʻi, there were conflicts between the chiefs on the windward side of the island, which is where Kalaupapa is, and Waikolu, Pelekunu, and then the chiefs on the south side, and they were contending over control of Molokaʻi. And at one point, the chief of Oahu aligned with the chiefs of the south, and they controlled Kalaupapa. So Kalaupapa had gone back and forth. In the census in 1841, it showed that there were 700 people living at Kalaupapa. And then in 1853, which is when the Mahele was going on, and when the land award applications would have been happening, there were 340 residents in Kalaupapa, and those who, among them making claims for their plots of land. And in the land award claims, they're talking about, the cultivation of kalo, the cultivation of sweet potato, growing of wauke. So it was a thriving community prior to it being set aside as a leprosy settlement. And there was even times where I think even during the time of Hansen's, Mikiʻala knows better, but they were, even at one point, they were exporting poi to the rest of the North valleys on the island. So Kalaupapa and all of the northern valleys, actually in traditional times, were more populated areas because they could support larger populations. And so, foreseeably, Kalaupapa could again support a larger population, although a lot of the streams and the changes in the ecosystem probably couldn't support it as it did at the time. But it was a very active and thriving community prior to it being set aside for that purpose.
So much history that we've heard about just in our initial discussion tonight. I want to get to some of the questions here, and they really sort of explored the tension. So I want to read a few of this, and Mikiʻala, I would like you to take this on. Why can't I hike down the trail to visit? $5 million for National Park Service and no public visitation. That's from Steve. There are so many children across the state who don't know anything about Kalaupapa. Is part of the future plan to include educational materials, even trips to the peninsula? I wish I had learned more growing up. That's from Kristen. So there's a natural curiosity, I think, that we all have to this place. You see these idyllic video of what it looks like, and the fact that there has not been large-scale development makes it sort of, this window into the past. At the same time, this person is asking, why can't I just hike down and take a tour on my own? I mean, how do we figure out what the appropriate level of outside interaction is with this place?
I'm going to say, first off, Molokaʻi people are pretty protective of Molokaʻi, period. So they scrutinize everybody. Kalaupapa has 3 layers extra of scrutiny because it's a special place. And also, it's isolation. So first off, the same challenges we have topside roll over to Kalaupapa with mokulele, very limited flight access when the weather is bad. It's really hard to get in and out. So access, or you're going to be fit and hike down a 3-mile trail that is very arduous. So the access is already physically discriminating in a lot of ways. And then on top of that, the accommodations, it's a very small place. We don't have a landfill. So we manage trash in a very different way. So if you think of everything it takes to just live a day-to-day life, waste management, septic systems, emergency response, and food, water, shelter, all of those things, like they are very, very limited, the accommodations. And so as the population is diminishing, that 100 visitor a day cap remains there because there needs to be all this support to ensure those things, safety and comfort for people who are coming in.
Yeah, Nancy, I'd love for you to weigh in on that, about the appropriateness of having large-scale visitation to this place.
I think it's tricky. I think I'd go back and also help people understand that the access to the trail crosses private land. So those landowners are working through their own process on what it looks like to have visitors cross their property from a liability standpoint. I can't speak for them, but I can tell you that is a pretty big issue, and that parcel is partially outside the Park Service boundary. So our ability to negotiate for that is somewhat limited. I think it's an interesting needle to thread overall. So I've been at the park about 4.5 years. My background's in education. I think a lot about remote places, how to share those places with people. I think timelines have a big piece of this. The patients have told their own story. Through this process, we have told a limited portion of that story because they were able to tell the story themselves. The Park Service itself, the National Park Service, we protect very special land and things that are either tied to really important stories or shaped by very important stories. So that piece of the puzzle of preservation has to be balanced with the education aspect. And again, Congress was pretty clear with us when we came in 1980 that this is a site for inspiration, education, and research. And that's partially because it's been so protected. When I think about timelines, like this place has been around for a long time, the patients were there for a long time, we're starting, the transition of management activities has been moving since the 90s, but that aspect of storytelling, that's just beginning to transition. And what does that look like? What is the role of the Park Service in that? Like, it is half of our mission, and half of the reason we were entrusted to come into this site. And what that looks like in the future and which story is told and how that story is told and who tells that story, that's just beginning now as we establish all of these different partners who have already been telling the story, people who've wanted to tell the story but don't think the time is right yet, the patients who are still alive and can tell their story. So I think that's a really sensitive, thoughtful place that we need to step into and continue that public dialogue around. And it's not just us.
Yeah, DeGray, I would love for you to weigh in on this.
Yeah, I would just like, community outreach has been a big part of ʻOhana O Kalaupapa. Over the last few years, we've reconnected over 1,000 families with their descendants at Kalaupapa, and they've been just amazing, happy, emotional, wonderful experiences. We have traveling exhibits that have gone to every island. There's a big one at Windward Community College now on the royal family's connection to Kalaupapa. We've gone to all the a lot of the Hawaiian immersion schools and every island with books and given out books to the schools on Kalaupapa. And so that has been a big part of KA'Ohana's mission is outreach and community education, because you're right, people, you talk to people 40, 50 years old, ask them about Kalaupapa, and they kind of draw a blank, and because it's just not taught in the schools. And that's the other thing we're working on now, is to hopefully get it into the schools.
Dr. Felton, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly mention about access and the restriction of access, because we understand this is a concern for many community members. And while we're talking about the future of Kalaupapa, I do want to just remind everyone that we still have patients living at Kalaupapa, and given their history and their wishes and the history of Hansen's disease and the stigma surrounding it, privacy is a really, really important thing for people that have experienced infectious diseases like Hansen's disease, and particularly that one in particular. And the patients really value their privacy, and I think we would be remiss to not mention that a big part of the reason why there's such restricted access there is because that is the wishes of the people who live there and who the place is currently for, and that they are very protective of their space and privacy, and we really value that on their behalf.
Yeah, that is a very important point. Please, Mikiʻala.
Build off of that. There are a lot of etiquettes that the community has been exercising that are, or some of the rules that, they're hard, soft rules and hard rules, but a lot of that was founded upon caring for and respecting patients and their wishes and not wanting to traumatize them because of the way we live life, the social way we live life today. So example, They used to get pa'i, they used to get punished for not having their shoes on, like we saw in the opening clips where they talked about the damage to their hands and feet because they didn't have sensation. And so they would be scolded and made sure that they had footwear on so they wouldn't get hurt. And so we always walk around with our shoes on so that it doesn't trigger for them memories of either some unfortunate incident happened to a loved one or to them themselves. So there's a lot of things that just being part of the community, that's just how and people, when newcomers come and they're like, why you guys do that? And we're like, that's just how. Like, and so we explain, because the patients used to always make us do this or that, and we honor and aloha them. And it's hard to bring that out to a bigger society who believes in their rights and democracy, and they just think they need to have a say, and like we're taking a vote, and we're like, no, we're just going do them like this because that's how Auntie like it, and if she says no, then it's no, and tomorrow she might change her mind. And so that fluidity, and it's just grace and aloha. And when you come to live in Kalaupapa, you embrace that. So now we are thinking, what are the things that make Kalaupapa Kalaupapa? Is it just the history? Is it just the landscape? Is it the physical reminders, the buildings and the grave markers? Or is it people who are really living the history and the story and able to share that authentically? Because when you get there, you feel that. You feel the stories still being perpetuated and living and breathing around you.
Yeah, that is such a beautiful description. Thank you for that. Dr. Brady, there's a question here from Eric in Kailua who says, can you share with us your interactions with patients as they transition to the next chapter? How closely are you working with the families, and how is the community coping with those transitions?
The patients are part of the family, and I'm tremendously privileged to be part of that family. So the things I've heard from patients are a good deal deeper than in a traditional continent doctor-patient relationship. Their concerns, their joys, their fears, and their ʻOhana, for those of them that do have ʻOhana, family, are part of that interaction, usually very supportive.
Thank you.
Everybody is by first name. I'm just Kalani. It's not Dr. Kalani, it's not Dr. Brady, it's just Kalani. When the canonization of Father Damien was anticipated, a group of Kane came to my office and walked in and said, Kalani, we're going to Rome for the canonization. Are you going to Rome for the canonization? And I sort of fibbed. I said, I think I'll watch it on television. And it was like I had insulted their mothers. And everybody left silently. About 2 minutes later, the leader of that group came in and said, Kalani, you are our KΑKOU. You take care of us. We are going to Rome. You are going to Rome to take care of us. And there were about 15 of them. Robert Casimiro, a very, very good friend, and I put on a gala fundraiser in Waikiki and raised a lot of money because, of course, the DOH can't pay for their Rome trip. And they can't pay for their Rome trip. So we raised a whole bunch, and Bishop Larry Silva from the Catholic Diocese covered our airfare, our hotel, our daily tours, Mass, visiting in St. Peter's for the canonization, meeting the Pope. It was just one group. There were also 550 pilgrims from Hawaii, from all the islands that went as well. But we were one family, and very close.
Thank you. Katie, this is a question that says, and this kind of dovetails to what Professor McGregor was sharing with us about who the descendants are of this place before it became a settlement, asking, shouldn't the descendants of those who were removed from that area have first dibs, and if not, why not? That's from Keone. Can you trace the lineage of the folks who are on the list to the actual places? Do you know who are the descendants of that place?
The department wouldn't necessarily have that information. The department actually is engaging in administrative rule-making processes. So currently, with the exception of Lanai, which is kind of where the idea came from, there's a wait list, right? And the wait list, for fairness purposes, goes by oldest application date, right? There are older versions of how the wait list works, but modern, it's an island-wide wait list. So with regard, interestingly enough, with regard to certain areas, like Lanai has a specific wait list just for people who live already on Lanai, or were connected to Lanai. So that idea is being carried over because we do have other communities where lineal descendancy or a connection to that place is really, really important. So for example, that's discussions with actually also ʻOhana on Molokaʻi, our King's Landing community. In Hana, we want to develop, and it's really important that basically people who already are living in Hana and understand the conditions, much like Kalaupapa, have priority. So there's actually already movement and amendments to how we manage our wait list to try to accommodate lineal descendancy. But it wouldn't necessarily, like the department wouldn't know that, right? So if once the rules are promulgated, it's like at the administrative end of it, my understanding is that it's with AG review and then it has to go to the gov. But once they're final, you know, and there's opportunities presented, those who do have claims to certain areas, they would need to show us how, right? And it would be part of the intake process, right? So just like needing to qualify your blood quantum, right? So there's a process and there's paperwork, and so that would be an additional step for beneficiaries who are interested in and have lineal links to those areas and want to be considered for those areas.
Thank you. We got some practical questions here for the mayor. This one comes from Trent. Is the county ready to assume responsibility going forward with fire recovery and transition of water rights and constant flooding problems? Seems like a lot to handle. Sheila is asking, is Maui County ready to handle this transition? What are the costs? Who pays? Will our property taxes go up?
Yeah, those are all the questions that I meant when I spoke earlier about the decisions that have to be made. As pointed out by council member, it would be logical that Maui County, which is already Molokaʻi Island, except for this one portion, would be the one to step in. But of course, we got to talk about all of the revenue sources, the funding sources, because right now, obviously the Park Service puts in the lion's share. Will that continue? That's a conversation we'll need to have with the National Park Service. The Department of Health was a huge part of the funding that was going on there, not just for salaries, but just, you know, in addition to that, if they're no longer connected, you know, will they continue to contribute to that? You know, DLNR, DHHL, they are two major landowners. Are they gonna, you know, support funding? And so I think all of those questions are fair questions, which is why we're gonna have community engagement. And it sounds like it's starting with those questions because there are people who are gonna bring that up. And we wanna hear all sides. This isn't an easy decision. And as far as timing is concerned, we don't get to choose when something like this happens. You know, when you're government, you just have to, you know, take on the next thing that comes your way. You don't get to say, wait, we're not ready, give me that next week or next year. You know, there's certain things that I think that we can control, but in this instance, this has been talked about for a while. This has also been anticipated that this would happen. But what we haven't done is filled in the details. And of course, we're just as curious about all of those things as the other. And that's why I tried to preface this in the beginning. We're not here to say, hey, we're here to take over and there's nobody else in the conversation. We're like, if you folks want us to do it, then let's talk about all the things that are going to require us or make us able to do it, so that we're not jumping into something that we're not ready for. But again, this is the start of the conversation. And as we've talked about, it's mostly community engagement, listening to all of our partners at whatever level they're at. You know, we've got tremendous support from, Senator Schatz, from Congresswoman Tokuda, who've been very active in this. You know, maybe they can help us with the funding piece. I mean, there's so many things we haven't yet explored. But I think the overarching theme for tonight is just the respect that we need to have for this one-of-a-kind place. There's no other place in the world like it. And recognizing that should guide how we move forward.
Okay, Councilmember, I would love to have you weigh in on this as well.
Mahalo, and the mayor is absolutely correct. It's going to be like a constant conversation that we'll be having with the larger community. I started to have this conversation with the different state agencies after Department of Health introduced SB 1432. And in my council committee, we did have 2 meetings. One last year where I invited the departments to present their kuleana and what that transition looks like for each of the different state agencies. And then this past January, we had another meeting on Molokaʻi and KΑKOU. And again, invited the state agency, the federal agencies to speak to what the transition would look like, who would take on the kuleana as Department of Health transitions out. National Park Service would be taking on or continuing the work that they're doing with managing the roads and the water, the structures, and those types of things that they're already doing. And for the county, as I mentioned earlier, we already have an MOU to provide additional, service with fire and police, and those MOUs are already in place. So whatever it's costing the county, which I think is minimal to nothing right now, but that support to NPS is already in place even before Kalawao County is incorporated into Maui County. And what I wanted to also share a little bit earlier to the question about access. I know national parks, when we talk about parks, there's an implication of recreation. And as everyone's saying here, like that is not this space. This space is for spirituality, for reverence of the history of this place. It's for connection and for healing. And it's not for extraction. And so, that kind of conversation about when Dr. Brady is describing how he's part of the family. Why? Because he's been contributing. He's been giving more than he's taking. And they want him to be part of that community, part of that family, because he's given so much. And so when people are thinking about, access and going there, are they thinking about giving and contributing, or are they only thinking about taking? So I think that's like a really important question that folks have to ask themselves.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right that the idea of a park, we do think it is a place to recreate and go have fun, and this is a very different kind of park. I know you want to weigh in on that, and then I want to get to Dr. Felton in a minute.
Nice cue up. So I do want to give Congress, when they established the park,
They established it specifically for inspiration, education, and research, not recreation, right? So I think it's really important to understand, like, that is the sort of the rule book that we were given as the National Park Service when we went in, and that remains. So the National Park Service, we have a lot of things that we do because we represent and we protect these places for all future generations of all people. Not just a certain small group. So it's really important that when we're doing work, we're thinking outside of like all of the stakeholders, right? Not just like a handful. So it's really important as we go into planning process, we have to include all that. So there was an over 10-year planning process to create the general management plan for the park that speaks to that idea of kokua to the place, that if you come, experience the place, be inspired by it, but there also is a vision in that plan for an opportunity to be there in a way that does give back to Kalaupapa. I think that's a real nod to the history of the place and how people have given to that place over time, the patients themselves, the community as a whole, the individuals that came in to take care of the patients and to take care of the land and the infrastructure around the patients. That's been going on for 150 years, right? So again, that plan exists. It was signed in 2021. It's on our website. Always happy to talk about it. As a matter of fact, talk to your friends, neighbors, and family members. They probably work for us if you live on Molokaʻi. So talk to them if you have questions about that plan, but it's out there.
I want to get to Dr. Felton, and just for sort of a clarification, when the transition fully happens, what will the Department of Health's role be, if anything? I mean, given how long that you have been stewards of this place, what will the level of involvement be, or will there be none?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, we care for the patients, but we care about the patients. We care about their legacy. We are ready and planning to support the jurisdiction, the county, the National Park Service. We intend to be able to continue to provide the historical knowledge and experience, but many of our activities will decrease. For example, we will no longer have sort of the authority to run a store, which we do now. We will, and there are numerous other activities, as has been mentioned. Many of the larger activities that used to be done by the Department of Health to manage the place have been solely transitioned to the National Park Service. Care for the electrical system, for example, the water, the waste, so many different things that the Department of Health now does not do and is just there to support. We think eventually, over an extended period of time, but eventually we are unlikely to have staff remaining living on the peninsula. We do have a number of environmental remediation projects that are expected to be many years long, that we will continue to manage, help to fund with state resources as they are now. But these are big projects that will take a long time and require, added state resources to resolve. So we'll definitely still be involved in sort of repairing environmental damages and fixing some of the areas, and as support and as much as we can do to help maintain the legacy and the sacredness of the place.
DeGray, I know you wanted to weigh in.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that ʻOhana, O Kalaupapa was formed by the patients, especially Bernard Pōmaikaʻi. He took the lead on that because he wanted an organization in place made up of residents, the descendants, and longtime friends of the community, because as their numbers grew smaller, they needed an organization in place that would make sure that their voices would continue to be heard, and that the legacy they wanted for the future of Kalaupapa would be obtained and continued in perpetuity. And in 2008, the Senate Concurrent Resolution 208 was an apology resolution signed by all the senators to the people of Kalaupapa. And yet, the organization that they formed, and so their voices would continue to be heard, they were not even included on the transition planning team. So it's really important to seek the knowledge of the residents. There's so few of them now. There's only 2 left, and if you wouldn't mind, could we have a minute of silence for Mele Watanuki, who just passed away? Her funeral's tomorrow. She was one of the last 3 living at Kalaupapa. The remaining 2 are 102, John Aruda and Winnie Harada, who is 95. So, as Mayor Bissen said, you can't just wait around. You don't know when you're going to have to act, and it could be very soon. So
thank you for sharing that with us.
If we could just have a moment of silence for Meili, I'd appreciate it. Is that possible?
I think it's possible. We have a limited time, but I appreciate you raising those names and sharing those stories with us tonight. I think that's very important, especially, given what the mayor did say, that there is, that we don't get to choose the timing, as you acknowledged, and that it could come soon. And, given the bill, a year after that, it turns over to the county. And so these questions have to be addressed. But thank you for sharing those names with us and sharing those stories with us. I do want to make sure that we include enough of the audience tonight. And Professor, I would like you to take this because, again, we are getting so many questions tonight about access. And there is this real tension because we know this has the potential to be a place of learning, but of course we've heard a lot about having to respect the place and all the traditions that you outlined for us. So, Professor McGregor, if you would sort of give your thoughts on this. This person is asking, will annual passes be available to go to the national park? Seems like a wondrous place to visit and experience the beauty, but also learn the history. Some people feel like they need to be in the place to truly understand it. A niece of the patient says, I go there every summer. I would like to see the future of Kalaupapa remain Kalaupapa, allow families that loved ones there had loved ones there visit and participate in caring for the Aina. Kalaupapa should remain untouched. That's from Teresa on Kauai. So you hear in that, how do we balance? Kalaupapa is, as the mayor noted, very unique, but there are a lot of spaces in Hawaii that have deep history, and we are figuring out this tension between giving people access, having them learn in the place, but also respecting the place.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we have to look at how the patients had wanted the area to be managed and to be accessed and respect that. I think that resonates throughout the whole period of the planning process that the park had undertaken. And the patients were very concerned that the sanctity of Kalaupapa be protected and sustained. And when the park, I was part of those, the whole community, I was living on Molokaʻi, we all took part in those discussions, and I thought it was good because they had three options. One was very limited access just for research and for, I think, families to go and reconnect with their places where their loved ones were rest. And then there was more expanded access, I think, sort of along the lines of what is now existing with a limit. I don't know if it would still be 100 or more. And then there was where there was, just open access and no limitations. I don't know where it landed, but I think those are the options that are still coming in from the responses we heard tonight. What is the appropriate level of access to still maintain the sanctity of Kalaupapa and respecting the patients who live there and who were not were isolated there. They were there by they didn't go there by choice, but they were forcibly isolated and to this place. So we have to respect that and honor that going forward, and continue to know how would we treat the grave sites of our loved one. Our cemeteries are not parks; they're not places we go to have recreation. And Kalaupapa most every place probably has someone who passed and who lived there and is now there in the ground. So it really is a heavy responsibility that we bear to honor those who are resting there and who lived there and passed on there.
Mickey,
can I just add something to what Davianna said? I think Nancy mentioned that we have 100 per day limit on people coming into Kalaupapa, and it hasn't reached that. And actually, when Father Damien was canonized and Mother Marianne became a saint, they said it was going to be overrun by people. They were going to come in by the droves, and it never did really get over more than 25 a day. So now, why is that? So you got to factor all these things in. It's just a very expensive place to go now, and hard to get to, and So it's going to be a real challenge, especially on where's the money going to come from. Yeah.
Mikiʻala, I would like for you to take this one from Eva. It says, the history is difficult to hear, but it must be acknowledged and learned from. What will Kalaupapa be in 100 years from now? When you look into the future, what would you like to see this place in a century?
That's a tough question. I've seen so many change just in the last 15 years. I happen to be the lay kahu of Kananoho Congregational Church, and inheriting the responsibility of holding that role in the community is really, really important because, and while the patient members have all passed away and we don't have new members joining the church, it's not that the church doesn't have a role. Like, people still come on Sundays, visitors come. People just day to day need a place to come and pray, or just to have quiet time and meditate, or come and hear the history. And especially since COVID, we had a lot of transition happen in our community. But when the bar shut down, all the gathering and people would play music. We had to move that over to the church facility. And then we used to have a craft shop where the patients would engage in all of their art and would socialize, and then they started selling, their artwork to just kind of put into the fund, the craft fund, but that has now gone away. And so now just for the community, every holiday, every time we need to make a birthday gift or Easter decorations, people come to the church. The library is now not really accessible. We've built a little library in the church. And so I'm seeing how just there's a transition, but what is it in the community that is really worth holding on to? Do you want to go to the library to look at it like it's a museum exhibit, or do you want to actually have it functioning for the people who eventually come to live there? And so when you ask me that question, I hope 100 years from now, there's a community of people, whoever they are, that understand the specialness, that want to hold, and no matter what space you occupy, you're going to honor everything that happened in that space before you. So if you live I remember moving into Auntie Miriam Mina's house. She painted the inside pink and yellow. It is like a little guava liliko'i cake in there. Like, it is, and the options are to paint it white and make it, standard and historical, or you have to maintain what the last patient, had in place. And so we've chose to repaint it, continue and perpetuate the pink and yellow, because that's just part of the coolness of who Auntie was. And so are people who are wanting to move there and imagine themselves in the future, are you willing to hold on to the historic structure? And people just want to change things all the time. And you got to commit to holding on to and appreciating, and not begrudgingly. Like, I live in a historic building, so I like hemo this railing, or I like change the stairs. No, you cannot. Like, one, it's the law. There's a historic preservation law that says you can't do that. But also, like, it's not just about the people who are coming in. I malama that house, so when Miriam Mina's family comes to see, they can see that place that and hear that part of the story and see it very clearly and vividly. And that's our gift, and that's our kuleana to the greater, not just as a descendant, and I'm saying not just as a descendant of patients. I'm speaking on behalf of all the ʻOhana, even the ones who don't even know that they're related to former patients, that they can come, and that's up to the kupuna to work their magic, and that aloha and that mana will translate beyond the physical space.
Yeah, Mayor, I would like to get your thoughts on what you just shared, because I think that what you're describing is a place that is full of life, that it is not just a place, I mean, this is obviously going to be a place of learning, and it has been for many years, but it is also a thriving community, and how do we do both?
I think it is so pristine, and it is so, it's a look back in time that you could never replicate. And that's really one of the things that makes it so special and able for people to learn, to see what it is. So I would love to see 100 years from now that it looks exactly the way it looks now. Whoever it is that's taking care of it, whoever it is that is occupying the space or doing things, but for it to remain the way it is, it's so special that for people to see it, they will feel like, obviously they've gone back in time. And then to hear the stories, to learn the stories. There should definitely be an educational piece to this. But this is more Arlington Cemetery than Disneyland. You know, you're going to a place that has meaning, not just for today, but as everyone has talked about, for what it stood for. And you can imagine what everybody had to endure to be there. But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place as is and shouldn't be changed. Again, no matter who's managing, whoever's in charge. Because again, there's no way to recreate what's already there. And yeah, I definitely think people should be allowed to come and have access, as talked about, in a limited way, in a way that's set forth by those who are managing that place. But there's so much that the world can learn about our history, and our own people should learn about our history.
Minus the deer.
There's a lot of deer there. That something has
We've
to
done
happen.
a whole insights on that one, and
we'll
that's
have to talk to
definitely an
DLNR
issue,
and
yes.
DHHL about the deer.
I'm just plugging them again.
Yes, yes.
Katie, there's some questions here about the National Park Service and the relationship and whether that lease will be extended. What are the conversations around that right now?
I don't think we've had those about extension. I mean, I can tell you that because it's a 50-year lease, under the law, there is an option to max it out, right? You have, under the law, it says at the max, it's 65-year lease. So there is an option to extend it. But I think one of the things that we do have to do with our beneficiaries is talk about our relationship with the National Park Service, because I think there might be some misunderstandings. I do hear community, you know, our beneficiaries who they don't want, you know, the Park Service to be in the picture. And so we have to have discussions with our beneficiaries about why that might be. Of course, from a department standpoint, right, an institutional standpoint, we really appreciate the partnership that we have with NPS, helping with the day-to-day management, you know. So when it comes to the question of cost, right, there's been a lot of questions to DHHL and the other state agencies, like, because the county wants to know and they want to kind of quantify, right, what it means, but it's really hard for DHHL because currently we really don't have anything, because a lot of that operational cost is actually borne by NPS through our general lease relationship. So, you know, so there are definitely benefits from a department standpoint with the relationship, and, you know, I think there is a desire to extend it, but we definitely have to be sensitive to our beneficiaries and have more engagement with them on that.
Councilmember, please weigh in.
I wanted to add, about 5 years ago, there was a group of beneficiaries, and, you know, DHHL did work together with the beneficiaries to explore ending the lease with National Park Service earlier than the 50 years. There was a desire to do that. I understand that in 1980 there was a feasibility plan, and the residents of Kalaupapa did support National Park Service. You know, Congress designating Kalaupapa National Park, and then NPS managing the infrastructure, the structures, and there was a desire to, or expectation of job creation for, you know, folks at Kalaupapa and topside Molokaʻi. I think one of the concerns is, you know, just as Mayor was saying, about, you know, protecting our place, and then having more decision making at home, and oversight over, you know, some of the projects moving forward. In 2017, there was you know, an effort to extend the runway. We know that there is a need for revenue. We know that you know, that tourism is a potential for revenue. And so for, you know, those of the beneficiaries, for the residents of topside Molokaʻi, we like to keep decision making at home as much as possible. And if that decision making is all the way in DC, then that's too far. That it needs to, be home rule, and that's how we like it on Molokaʻi. And Mayor Bissen, of course, supports, like that decision being where the residents have that autonomy over our home and able to protect Kalaupapa in the way that it should be.
Dr. Felton, there's another question here. This is from Julian in Honolulu. Who takes care of the property and buildings once the Department of Health is no longer responsible? We know that you had said that a lot of those duties are already transferred to the Park Service, but does that ultimately go to the county then, or does it go to the Park Service and the county? There's just a question about the responsibility of the buildings themselves, of the infrastructure itself.
Yeah, so the buildings themselves are actually owned by and on state agency land, but DHHL and DLNR land. So technically they are owned by those agencies, as much as land can be owned, of course. But through their agreements with the National Park Service, the National Park Service maintains and manages those structures. So, even now, Department of Health only manages and upkeeps it's a small portion of the structures. It's the structures that our employees live in and that are our patients' houses. And the other structures, especially the historical structures, are maintained and managed by the National Park Service. They have the expertise to, historically rejuvenate the buildings, and have done just a fantastic job of bringing some of particularly the more publicly used buildings back to life. So in that sense, really not too much will change. If Department of Health is not present there, eventually the maintenance of those structures and management of that will most likely continue with National Park Service, depending on their agreements with DHHL and DLNR.
Thank you.
I would just like to jump in really quick, because I think there's a common misconception that, again, I think it was really important that you shared that map at the beginning. So most of the infrastructure is on DHHL land, but again, they're like a third or less landholder in that location. So we only have a lease with DHHL as the National Park Service. Our boundary is much bigger. The public law that's created a national park is at the U.S. congressional level. So I think it's really important to understand that even if that lease no longer exists, the National Park Service presence still does. Now, what the National Park Service presence looks like going into the future, there's so many options on how to manage a national park, and I don't think that is talked about enough because there hasn't really been that space. The general management plan really sets a vision for what it will look like, but it doesn't necessarily give a blueprint for how that work is done. And again, out of over 430 sites across the country, there are so many examples of ways that parks are managed that exercise more local control, that involve lots of different partners, universities, and landowners. So I think sometimes there's this misconception that, so if the lease ends, we would consider that those inholdings of private property inside the park boundary. It just changes our relationship to that particular space of land.
I think that's a really important clarification. I want to get to Professor McGregor briefly. We're almost out of time, actually. It goes so fast. The history and culture being shared tonight is captivating. I had no idea. I want to learn more. Where can I get this information? It should be part of Hawaii history class before it's lost. I happen to have a fourth grader, and she's learning about this right now, but I do think that our understanding of these spaces is really sort of glossed over in elementary school social studies and then kind of moved along. Where would you recommend people go if they want to really learn more?
I have the websites, but there's a book, I can't remember, it was written by the woman who's a daughter of a superintendent.
Yeah. It's a 650-page book on the history of Kalaupapa. It was Book of the Year in Hawaii a few years ago. And it's written by Anway Law. I forgot the name.
And the beauty of it is she gives a lot of agency to the patients at the time. So a lot of the history comes down, it's kind of skewed by the Catholics and the Christians. But she looks at the patients and the agency that they had and organizing themselves and taking the the organization and the social power into their own hands. I think if we look at Kalaupapa, it has such a layered history. So the history of the people who first lived there, who cultivated the land, who honored our gods and lived there and, you know, lived in alignment with the land. And then it comes it comes disrupted with the patients, this forced isolation of people, the tragedy that they suffered, the burdens. And so this has also become a part of the land. You can't go back to the original way it was because it's so overburdened with this 100-year history of the people who lived there and died there. And then now, as we go forward, we have to be very conscious of that history. The other thing is, we've been talking about Hawaiian control and DHHL, but the peninsula is not just Kalaupapa, it's also Makanalua and it's Kalawao. So Hawaiians can resettle the homestead there, but that doesn't mean that Makanalua and Kalawao can have other purposes and other functions. So the peninsula is much bigger than what the area that's called Kalaupapa and under Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And so when we look at the whole area, we have to be mindful of, the patients especially, but look at that layered history and be very respectful.
Yeah.
Really quick, I just want to add that a lot of patients have written biographies, autobiographies, or worked with. So please read their stories first before you read people's interpretations of their experiences, and start there. Be careful of historical fiction, because sometimes they're embellished. And the Hawaii State Archives just put online a beta access to Kalaupapa records. So if you're looking for your own family members, like now there's a lot of things that are accessible online.
I want to stay with you for a second. I would love for you to take this question to kind of close us out. How many people besides the patients live in Kalaupapa currently? What do you want people to know about what it is like there right now, day to day?
I think there's like 72 of us in the last tsunami evacuation exercise. And we gotta take care of each other. I think the people who are there now are the ones who are living and like stewarding this space on a day-to-day. They see the very incremental changes on a very Hawaiian level. That's just relationship. And really the people who are there, most of them are very open with sharing those experiences with as many people as possible. But at the same time, the thing we've inherited from the patients is care and concern for anyone who comes. We want to be hospitable. We want to make sure you are safe. We want to make sure that you are looked after properly. And so we need to, all of these conversations are meant to help us figure out how to continue to provide that and care for anyone who comes to Kalaupapa in that same spirit. Real quick, I was thinking about you, Bissen, Mayor. Like, as a Maui County resident, there are certain things that we expect out of our county, services that they provide, and we're looking at how does that translate to the residents in Kalaupapa in the future. So it's kind of engineering in both directions.
I love our discussion tonight. Unfortunately, we're out of time. There's a comment here from Hank who says, do this program again once it is appropriate. Now that more people are aware of the situation, I'm sure there will be more input. We know that this is the start of a conversation, certainly not the end. Mahalo to our guests, and to mahalo to you at home for sharing your perspectives tonight. As we have heard, Kalaupapa is much more than a historic site. It's a place that has been shaped by pain, resilience, and above all, community, and now a place soon entering a new chapter. The decisions made in the years ahead will help determine how Hawaii cares for this land, honors its history, and carries those stories forward. Next week, we are back to Insights, kicking off our election coverage ahead of the August 8th primary. We'll start with the Democratic candidates for State House District 28. That includes areas of Sand Island, Iwilei, and Chinatown. Please do join us then. I'm Yanji Denise. Until next time, thanks for joining us. Aloha and good night.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Local broadcasts of KΑKOU are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo. And by Hawaii Catholic Community Foundation, creating a legacy that honors Hawaii's 200-year Catholic heritage while building a strong, faith-filled future. Hawaiian Native Corporation, honoring the legacy of Kalaupapa and the courage and resiliency of its residents.